The courtroom sat in complete stillness, that kind of silence that carries a weight. You could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, echoing in the grand hall where justice was about to speak once again. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses and gently placed a stack of case files before him. His voice, calm but commanding, filled the air. "All right," he said softly. "Let's bring in the next case." The bailiff cleared his throat, scanning the list. Case number 47. Minor involved in a traffic violation. The crowd, a mix of curious faces and tired regulars, turned toward the door as it creaked open. And then, the courtroom saw him. A small 12-year-old boy walked in slowly, his steps hesitant, his eyes fixed on the ground. His shoes were scuffed, his hoodie slightly oversized, sleeves hanging over small, trembling hands clutching a folded ticket. He looked more like a frightened child caught sneaking out past bedtime than a defendant standing in court. Judge Caprio's expression softened immediately. He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting from official to human. "Hey there, young man," he said with warmth in his voice. "You here all by yourself?" The boy nodded nervously, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. I came alone." "Where are your parents?" Caprio asked gently. "They couldn't come, sir," the boy replied, eyes darting up for just a second before dropping again. The judge paused. The courtroom, already quiet, felt even heavier. Caprio was used to people standing before him. Adults, sometimes angry, sometimes ashamed. But this was different. A child alone standing before a judge. It wasn't the law he saw. It was a story waiting to be told. "All right," Caprio said softly, flipping through the file. "Let's see what we've got here." The sound of paper rustling was loud in the silence. He read aloud. "Caught driving a motorcycle at 11:45 p.m. Speed recorded, 48 miles per hour in a 25 zone." Caprio looked up again, brow furrowed. Driving? At 12 years old? He leaned back in disbelief. There was a faint murmur in the courtroom. Gasps, whispers, people shaking their heads. The boy swallowed hard, his small voice cracking. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to break any rule." Caprio tilted his head slightly, studying him with kind but piercing eyes. "What were you doing out that late, son?" The boy hesitated, fumbling with the edge of his hoodie. "I had to go somewhere." The judge nodded slowly, still calm. "Somewhere? Where exactly?" The boy didn't answer right away. His lips trembled, and he bit down to stop them from shaking. "Sir," he whispered, "I just had to." A hush spread again. Everyone felt something was buried deep in that answer. It wasn't defiance, it was desperation. Judge Caprio placed his pen down. His tone grew softer. "Son, look at me," he said kindly. "You're not in trouble right now. I just need to understand what happened, okay?" The boy lifted his head. His eyes were red, the kind that told stories of sleepless nights. And in that gaze, the judge saw something. A quiet kind of pain, the kind that didn't belong in someone so young. "I'm not here to punish you," Caprio said gently. "I'm here to listen." The boy took a deep breath, clutching the ticket tighter. The camera would zoom in at this point, close up on his trembling fingers, his small chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Behind him, the people in the courtroom, a police officer, a few citizens waiting for their own cases, all leaned forward unconsciously. No one was talking now. Everyone could sense this wasn't just another case. Caprio leaned back in his chair, lowering his glasses slightly. His eyes softened, his voice now low and fatherly. "Take your time, son. We'll get through this together." The boy nodded, but tears were already forming. He blinked hard, trying to keep them from falling. The kind of tears that fight their way out, no matter how strong you try to be. The judge looked around, noticing the emotion filling the room. He sighed lightly, saying almost to himself, "Sometimes these walls hear more pain than justice." He looked back at the boy. "All right," he said, tapping the file gently. "Let's start from the beginning. You were driving late at night. Can you tell me why?" The boy didn't answer yet, just closed his eyes, one tear rolling down his cheek. Then he whispered, voice breaking, "Sir, it wasn't for me." Judge Caprio froze, brows raising slightly. heart already sinking at what that might mean. The audience could feel it too. The story behind those words was going to hurt. A close-up on the judge's face. Concern, confusion, compassion, all blending into one powerful expression. He said quietly, "What do you mean, son?" And the boy looked up, eyes wet but determined, and said the words that made everyone in that courtroom stop breathing. "It was for my dad." The camera would pan slowly across the silent courtroom. The bailiff's eyes wide, the crowd frozen, and Judge Caprio staring at the boy as if time had stopped. Then, soft background piano music starts. The narrator's voice, calm and emotional. Sometimes in the quiet halls of justice, a story begins not with guilt, but with love. The courtroom was still silent, the kind of silence that hangs heavy after a storm. Everyone waited for the next words. Judge Frank Caprio, his voice softer now, leaned slightly forward on his bench. "You said it was for your dad," he said gently. "Can you tell me what you mean, son?" The boy hesitated. His lips parted, but the words struggled to come out. He blinked, looking at the wooden floor as though searching for courage hidden in the cracks. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled like a whisper carried by the wind. "He was sick, sir." The audience shifted in their seats, a subtle wave of empathy spreading through the room. Caprio tilted his head, pen resting still between his fingers. "Sick?" he repeated softly. The boy nodded. He had been coughing for weeks. Last night, he couldn't breathe. Caprio's expression changed, the firmness of a judge fading into the concern of a father. "And where was your mother?" he asked. The boy took a shaky breath. She's gone, sir." A pause. Gone could mean many things, but the tone said enough. Caprio's eyes lowered for a brief second. "I see," he murmured as if to himself. The gavel, lying beside his hand, gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of justice, but at this moment it looked more like a burden. "So you took your father's motorcycle? In the middle of the night?" Caprio asked carefully. The boy nodded again. "Yes, sir. I knew the pharmacy was open until midnight. I thought if I hurried, I could make it back in time before anything happened." A faint tremor ran through his words. He swallowed hard. "I didn't even think about the speed. I just wanted him to be okay." The camera would pan to Caprio, his hands clasped, eyes moist, shoulders slightly drooped as if he carried the boy's pain with him. "And the police caught you?" he asked gently. "Yes, sir," the boy said. "They stopped me near the pharmacy. I told them I just needed the medicine, but they said rules are rules." Caprio nodded slowly, his mind replaying the scene. A little boy, barely tall enough to reach the handlebar, rushing through dark streets, cold wind slapping his face. Not for mischief, not for thrill, but for love. The judge sighed quietly. "You know, son," he said, his voice low, "the law exists to protect people, especially young ones like you. But sometimes the law doesn't see the story behind the act." The boy looked up, confused. Caprio smiled faintly. "What I mean is, the law doesn't know your heart. Only you do." The courtroom remained utterly still. Even the bailiff, usually expressionless, was watching closely, his stern eyes softening. Caprio leaned back, breaking the tension for a moment. "What's your name, young man?" "Eli," the boy said quietly. "Eli Turner." "That's a strong name," Caprio replied, smiling gently. "You know, Eli, my father used to tell me something. No one's ever in trouble for caring too much. I think he'd have liked you." Eli managed a weak smile, the first since he walked in. Caprio flipped through the case papers again, mostly formalities now. "According to the report, you didn't have a license, of course, and you were going almost twice the speed limit." He looked up again, teasing lightly. "You sure you weren't trying to set a record?" A few people in the courtroom chuckled softly, a small moment of light in the heaviness. Eli shook his head quickly, flustered. "No, sir. I was just scared I'd be too late." That sentence landed deep. Too late. Two words that carried the weight of guilt, love, and fear. Caprio's expression changed again. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his tone almost a whisper now. "Eli," he said, You said your father couldn't breathe. What happened when you got back? Eli hesitated, his small fingers twisting the fabric of his sleeve. The answer didn't come right away. The air in the courtroom felt tight. Finally, Eli's voice cracked as he said, He wasn't moving. His head dropped. I called the ambulance, but they said it was too late. Gasps rippled quietly across the courtroom. Caprio's eyes glistened. He didn't look away. He didn't hide it. He took off his glasses, wiping them slowly, using the gesture as an excuse to blink away emotion. I'm so sorry, Eli, he said softly. You did everything you could, son. Everything. The boy's shoulders shook, but he didn't cry. He just stared down at his shoes, whispering, I just wanted to help him, sir. I thought if I was fast enough, I could save him. Caprio looked at the officer standing nearby, and then back at the boy. You know something, he said quietly. If every lawbreaker in my courtroom had a reason like yours, I'd have an empty docket. A few quiet laughs escaped the room, but they weren't mocking. They were tender. Caprio smiled gently again, but this time it was a smile filled with pain. He leaned forward one last time, voice soft and fatherly. You've been through more than most grown men, Eli. And yet, here you are, standing tall, speaking the truth. That takes courage, Eli finally lifted his head. My dad used to say, real courage isn't about being strong, it's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. Caprio nodded, moved. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Eli said, his voice breaking, and he told me that I should always be honest, no matter what. The judge smiled warmly. Then he raised you right. He turned slightly toward the camera, in cinematic style as if addressing the viewer. Sometimes you see a child in court and think it's just another case. But behind every file, every fine, every name, there's a heartbeat. Caprio looked back at Eli, eyes glistening. Thank you, son, for reminding us of that. The piano music swells softly again. A voiceover narration begins as the camera zooms out slowly. In that quiet courtroom, justice wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding. And for the first time in a long while, everyone in the room remembered what humanity looked like. The scene fades gently to black. On-screen text appears. But Eli wasn't done yet. What he said next would leave everyone speechless. The courtroom was still, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that holds its breath before something breaks. Judge Frank Caprio sat motionless, his fingers intertwined under his chin, studying the young boy standing before him. The boy, Eli, looked smaller than ever now, his voice barely a whisper, his hands fidgeting nervously with the ticket he still held like a burden. Caprio spoke softly, breaking the quiet. Eli, I want you to tell me something. When you left your house that night, what was going through your mind? Eli blinked. For a moment, he looked like he wasn't sure if he should answer. His lips trembled, his eyes unfocused, as if he were replaying that night all over again. Then in a faint voice, he said, I thought I could save him. Caprio didn't move. The words hung heavy in the air, echoing in the wooden walls of the courtroom. Eli continued, his words shaking. I saw my dad lying on the couch. He said he was fine, but I knew he wasn't. He couldn't breathe. His hands were cold. I begged him to let me call an ambulance, but he said no. He didn't want me to worry. Eli took a deep breath, his small chest rising and falling. So I waited till he fell asleep, and then I took his bike. I thought if I went fast, if I got the medicine quick, maybe he'd be okay when I came back. He swallowed hard, voice breaking. But when I opened the door, he wasn't breathing anymore. A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even the officer who brought Eli in looked down, blinking rapidly. Caprio didn't say anything. He couldn't. He just watched, eyes glistening, heart breaking quietly behind the bench. Eli rubbed his eyes with his sleeve. I called the ambulance, sir, but they said it was too late. They took him away, and then the house was just quiet. Caprio's voice was soft, trembling slightly. You were alone all night, weren't you? Eli nodded. Yes, sir. I didn't know what to do. The next morning, I went to school like nothing happened. The judge's hand tightened around his pen, knuckles white. He took a long breath before speaking. Why didn't you tell anyone, son? You could have called someone, a teacher, a neighbor. Eli hesitated, and then came the moment that would leave everyone speechless. I couldn't, sir, he said, voice cracking. Because my dad always told me to be strong, to not make anyone feel sorry for us. Caprio's eyes softened. He told you that? Eli nodded, wiping another tear. He said people already had their own problems. We shouldn't add to them. He looked up at the judge now, voice breaking. So I just went on, sir. Like he was still there. The silence after those words was deafening. The entire courtroom froze. No sound, no whispers, not even breathing. Caprio leaned forward slightly, his own eyes red now. And when you said earlier that you wanted to finish what your father started, what did you mean? Eli looked straight at him this time. He used to say that helping people was the only way to live a full life. He wanted to open a small community kitchen someday for people who had no one. He said one day we'd do it together. A single tear rolled down Caprio's cheek. And now? He asked softly. Eli smiled faintly, painfully. Now, I just want to make him proud. Even if he can't see it, there was a stillness, the kind that breaks hearts. Even the air in the courtroom seemed heavier, almost reverent. The camera would slowly zoom in on Caprio's face, his lips pressed tight, trying to hold back the emotion flooding through him. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his pen and took off his glasses. He took a long pause, then spoke, voice soft and shaking. Eli, I've heard many stories in this courtroom, but I've never heard anything like this. The boy looked down. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to break the law. Caprio shook his head gently. No, son. What you broke wasn't the law. It was your heart trying to save another. The crowd stirred. A few sniffles echoed. Someone dabbed their eyes. Caprio continued, voice filled with compassion. You did something out of love. And love, no matter how messy it looks, can never be a crime. Eli blinked rapidly, holding back tears. But the police said, Caprio interrupted softly, the police did their job, son. But my job is to see the person behind the paper. He leaned closer, his tone almost whispering now. Do you know what I see right now, Eli? I see a young boy who lost everything, but still chose love over fear. Eli's lips trembled, his voice barely audible. I just miss him, sir. Caprio nodded, eyes glistening. I know you do. He exhaled deeply, whispering, I miss my father too. That simple admission broke whatever composure was left in the room. You could almost hear hearts cracking. Eli looked up suddenly, surprised. You do, sir? Caprio smiled sadly. Yes, he passed a long time ago, but not a single day goes by that I don't think of him, or try to live in a way that would make him proud. Eli smiled weakly, tears streaming down his cheeks. That's what I want too. Caprio reached for a tissue, dabbing his eyes discreetly, and said, Then you already have, son. You already have. A few soft claps broke the silence, the kind that happens when people don't know what else to do with their emotions. The judge raised his hand gently, signaling for quiet. He took a deep breath, then said slowly, Eli, you taught us all something today. Justice isn't always about laws. Sometimes it's about love. And tonight, your father's love and your courage reminded us what that truly means. The music swells softly, piano slow and emotional. The camera pans across tearful faces in the courtroom. Ordinary people touched by an extraordinary act of love. Caprio looks down at his bench, whispers to himself, May we never forget the humanity behind every case. The boy didn't just come to court that day to face justice. He came to teach everyone there what real justice looks like. The courtroom was still. You could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the shuffle of a tissue, and the quiet sound of people trying to hide their tears. Judge Frank Caprio took a long, slow breath. He removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and looked down at the trembling boy standing before him. Eli, small, broken, but full of quiet strength. For a few seconds, Caprio didn't speak. His eyes said everything: grief, empathy, reflection. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the bench, and his soft voice filled the silence. Caprio, gently: Eli, I've been sitting in this courtroom for many years. I've heard excuses, lies, and stories that break your heart. But today, I've heard something different, something true. The boy lifted his gaze, eyes red and tired. Caprio, you didn't come here as a criminal. You came here as a son, a boy who tried to save his father. The crowd watched, breath held. Caprio reached for the papers in front of him, the official record. He looked at it, then slowly set it aside. Caprio, according to this paper, you broke a law. But according to my heart, you honored your father in the most beautiful way possible. Eli's lips trembled. His fingers clutched his sleeve. Caprio's voice deepened, filled with compassion. Caprio, I lost my father too, Eli. And even now, decades later, I sometimes close my eyes and still hear his voice. That love you feel, it never fades. And I think your father's watching you right now, proud of the man you're becoming. The boy started crying softly. Caprio paused, letting him. Even the officer standing by the door wiped his eyes quietly. Caprio looked down for a moment, then smiled faintly. You know what I think, Eli? I think your father was right. We all have problems. But helping others, that's what makes us human. You reminded all of us of that today. He leaned back, looked at the courtroom audience, and continued speaking, not just to Eli, but to everyone. Caprio, every day I sit here and see pain, people struggling, fighting, crying, and sometimes the law feels cold. But justice, real justice, must have warmth. It must have compassion. The courtroom fell completely silent again. A single tear rolled down Caprio's cheek as he reached for his gavel. He looked at Eli. Caprio softly. Eli, I can't bring your father back. But what I can do, what I will do, is make sure this moment honors his love. He raised his gavel slightly, then spoke the words that would echo through every heart in the room. Caprio, in the eyes of this court, you are not guilty. You are forgiven, and more than that, you are admired. The courtroom gasped. Eli's small hands went to his mouth, tears streaming down his face. Caprio stood up slowly and stepped down from the bench, something he rarely ever did. He walked toward the boy, each step echoing softly on the courtroom floor. When he reached him, he gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Caprio, quietly, your father raised a good son. Eli whispered through tears. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make him proud. Caprio smiled, his voice barely audible. You already did. The moment felt suspended in time. No one moved. No one spoke. Then unexpectedly, Caprio turned to the court officer. Officer, I'd like to donate the fine myself, in Eli's father's name. And I want it to go to a community kitchen in this city. Gasps filled the room again. People nodded, eyes wet. The officer looked stunned, then saluted softly. Officer, yes, Your Honor. Caprio turned back to the boy. And one more thing, Eli. When that kitchen opens, I want you to be the first one to serve a meal there. The boy stared at him, overwhelmed. You really mean that, sir? Caprio smiled warmly. I do. Because your father's dream deserves to live on. Through you, the boy burst into quiet sobs. Caprio knelt slightly, patting his shoulder. It's okay to cry, son. It means your heart's still full, the boy whispered. I wish he could see this. Caprio looked up, eyes shimmering. He does, Eli. Trust me. He does. A mother in the back wiping her eyes. The bailiff standing still, hand over his heart. Caprio, still beside the boy, looking toward the ceiling, as if silently speaking to his own father. In that small courtroom, justice didn't wear a robe or carry a gavel. It wore compassion and a tear-stained smile. Judge Frank Caprio reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest verdict is kindness. Eli walking out of the courtroom, the sun shining through the doors, symbolic of hope. Caprio watches him leave, a faint smile on his face. He whispers to himself, maybe that's why we're really here, not to punish, but to understand. Because behind every case, there's a human story waiting to be heard. The courtroom was empty now. The wooden benches that had witnessed countless judgments were silent again. Only a faint echo of footsteps remained. Judge Frank Caprio's slow, thoughtful walk toward his chambers. He stopped near the bench where Eli had stood just an hour ago. The boy's tearful face replayed in his mind, his trembling hands, his soft apology, his final words echoing, "I just wanted to make him proud." Caprio placed his hand gently on the bench. It was cold, but he could still feel the warmth of that moment. Caprio sat down alone, his robe folded beside him. He looked at the framed photo on his desk, an old black and white picture of his father. He smiled faintly. Caprio, softly, "Dad, if you were here today, you'd tell me I did the right thing, wouldn't you?" He chuckled softly under his breath, then sighed. "You always said, Frank, don't just follow the law. Understand it. Feel it." He leaned back in his chair, eyes moist, and whispered, "That's what I tried to do today." A gentle breeze from the window fluttered the papers on his desk. For a second, it almost felt like a quiet nod from heaven, as if his father was answering back. In the halls of justice, not every verdict is about guilt or innocence. Some are about healing. Some are about giving a second chance to a broken heart. Caprio stared at the city skyline through the window. Down below, he could see people rushing. Some angry, some tired, some lost. He thought of Eli again, that small boy with a mountain of grief on his shoulders, and yet so much strength in his heart. He whispered to himself, how many Elis walk these streets every day? How many children carry the pain of loss, unseen and unheard? His eyes softened again. Maybe justice isn't about punishing them, he said quietly. Maybe justice is about listening to them. Days later, Caprio was in his office when his phone rang. "Secretary, Judge, you've got a call." A boy named Eli Caprio smiled instantly. He picked up the receiver. Caprio. "Eli, my friend, how are you?" Eli, nervously but happy. "Sir, I wanted to tell you, the kitchen you donated for, they used the money to buy new tables and food, and they asked me to serve the first meal today." Caprio's eyes glistened. He leaned forward, resting his elbow on the desk. Caprio, "I told you, you'd be the first to serve." "How did it feel?" Eli, "I was nervous at first, but when I saw people smiling, I felt like Dad was smiling too." Caprio's throat tightened. He whispered softly, "He was, Eli. He definitely was. Sometimes we think the courtroom is where justice lives, but real justice lives in small moments, in forgiveness, in love, in the courage to understand someone's pain." Eli handing food to a homeless man, smiling. Judge Caprio walking through the courthouse hallway, shaking hands with a janitor. A mother holding her child, watching Caprio's viral clip on her phone, wiping her tears. Caprio's voice plays softly in the background, from an old interview clip. "Caprio, if the law makes you lose your humanity, then it's not justice anymore. Justice must have a heart." Always back in the courtroom, late evening. Caprio walks up to his bench one last time before closing for the day. He runs his hand along the polished wood and smiles. He says softly, "You've seen a lot of tears today, haven't you, old friend?" He laughs quietly to himself. Then almost instinctively, he looks up and says, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me that compassion is the highest form of justice." He places his gavel down gently, not with authority, but with peace. As he turns to leave, the camera lingers on the empty bench. The golden light of sunset pours in through the windows, casting a warm glow over the judge's chair. One day we'll all stand in a courtroom far greater than this, not before a judge, but before our own conscience. And on that day, the verdict won't depend on laws, but on love. Eli serving food at the kitchen, smiling with other kids. Caprio driving home, looking thoughtful, a faint smile on his face. A small photo of his father on the dashboard, next to a handwritten note, justice with compassion. Every case tells a story, every story hides a heartbeat, and every heartbeat deserves to be heard. The music fades into a gentle piano. The camera slowly pans upward to the courthouse flag, waving in the evening light. Kindness is the law that needs no courtroom.